Croeso, Difda, Bynachtin, Gia Hwitch, Fulcha, Daymat. Welcome to the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. I am your humble host, Sian Esther Powell, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey through all the myths and legends of the 6 Celtic nations. That's Wales, Cornwall, Brittany, Isle of Man, Scotland and Ireland. Welcome. Well, I've gone and done a silly little thing, haven't I? So I recorded a whole different podcast episode today, because anyone that has ever listened to this podcast will know that each episode we focus on one of the 6 Celtic nations. I think I went to say nations and regions at the same time. One of the Celtic nations. And then we sometimes reference other nations as well, because I really like to trace similarities. But we do focus on one of the 6 Celtic regions. And I always do it in the same order. So those of you who are rather astute will be able to guess which one comes next. If you look at the previous episodes, they're always done in the same order. And I actually recorded. Oh, my brain's not working now because I've already done a whole episode today. Do you hear that? That was Bailey bursting into my door. Yeah, for some reason, I had it in my brain that I was doing Galicia today. Poor Isle of Man. Completely skipped over Isle of Man, which I am shocked at because I always love covering the Manx folklore stuff. I really love it, which has actually been in my favour today because, I pulled all of my sources together, reread all of my stuff and recorded the episode on the Galician episode. I won't spoil it, what it is. And then as soon as I finished it, I thought, hang on a second, because I went to look at I've got a spreadsheet of podcast topics, would you believe? So I have planned, a year in advance for a podcast, or more than a year in advance, knowing me, for podcast topics. So I double checked that to see which ones on it that I had done and which ones I've still got left to do. And I realised that, I'd completely missed out the Isle of Man. Sorry, Isle of Man. So that is what this episode is, of course. We're talking about Manx folklore. But it does mean, listeners, that I've got a podcast episode ready to go for next month. So you won't be waiting another 3 odd months for that one. But the beginning of that one, I'll be talking as if you have waited for a few months. So just bear in mind, I might upload it fairly quickly after this one. We shall see. Lovely to have you here. The waffle is over. We're back to Isle of Man. And what are we talking about? We're going to be talking about the Glasthin. And is it Glashtin or Glashtin? Wait, I'm going to pause this and ask one of my Manx friends. I think it's Glashtin. So if I get corrected soon and I randomly change pronunciation midway through the episode, well, we're just going to have to live with it, aren't we? You know by now this is not the most polished and professional podcast. It really is just me, presumably talking to a bunch of my mates around the world who also love folklore and myths and legends. So what exactly is the Glasthin? There's quite a lot of different folk tales, including a Glasthin, but there's also some similar creatures as well. You've got the Cavalishta and the Tarawishta, and I might talk about those a little bit later, but for now the Glasthin is one of those types of creatures that basically is in disguise and wants to lure you away. So the Glasthin is described as a goblin, but to me that's an interesting thing because goblin brings up very different images in my mind to a lot of the visual representations of the Glasthin. So it's usually depicted as sort of like half humanoid and then half horse, like a werehorse. when it's in its kind of natural form. But usually the Glashtin is disguised as a handsome man, so like a tall, dark stranger trying to lure you away. And he's usually given away by his horse ears. Now, this is a really common motif found in folktales, that you'll have like a tall, dark stranger trying to lure women away, and they just have one feature that's wrong, that's off, right? In the Glashtin's case, it is horse ears. And you know what? I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to say it. At this point, if a tall, dark stranger wants to come my way and take me to the other world, I don't care if he's got horse ears. I don't care if he's furry in the inside like a werewolf. I don't care. If he wants to have a crack at this and take me away to a place where I'm never going to age and all of the food's going to be delicious and smell good, I'm there, baby. Get me out of here. I'm ready to leave. I thought I better shoot my shot in case there's any Glashtin listening to this episode. I'm just thought I'd put it out there. But another feature of the Glashtin basically is that he's big and hairy. He's a big old hairy man. And that's fine by me as well. Sorry, listeners. I don't know what's got into me in this episode. I've already recorded an episode today. I think that's what it is. And my brain's just going a bit loopy. So Glashtin, it derives from water. So the etymology of the word and what it's thought to kind of mean and stem from is the glash bit, I think, is meant to be stream. So it is a water-based creature, and sort of in a same way similar to the Scottish Kelpie, when I've talked about the Scottish water horse before, is that Kelpies sometimes in folk tales also play that type of role, in that they can disguise themselves as beautiful men or beautiful women to lure people to touch them, and then they can drag them down to the bottom of the water and drown them and presumably eat them. Now, I'm not into that bit. That bit we can skip past, okay? Don't want any of that. But the Glashtin is sort of doing the same type of thing, really, is disguising itself as a beautiful, big old hairy man with horse ears and just trying to lure people in. And really, he is a bit of a little bit of I try and make these episodes child friendly. And I'm like tripping over my words here, but really I'm probably just going to say things that children would skip past anyway and wouldn't really get it. But he's a little bit of a pest, right? If you know what I mean. He's a little bit of a pest. All of my aforementioned stuff before is joking. I am joke, because the Glashtin is a little bit of a pest and doesn't really take no for an answer very well, which is not a good thing. It is, in fact, the worst thing one can do when someone hears a no, is to not take it well. But the more direct translation, and the one that comes up more often, is that Glashtin means hairy goblin, specifically. Hairy goblin. So in Moore, Morrison and Goodwin's Manx vocabulary, Glashtin has been described as hairy goblin or big hulking boy. Big hulking boy. There are some examples of the Glashtin being helpful. There are folktales and collections and stories of a Glashtin kind of working on a farm or doing tasks like that. There's, a Glashtin being able to carry people on his shoulders and do things like that. But there is a very common motif with the Glashtin stories that pops up across folktales around the world. And it is a very common motif of cutting the hem of your dress to escape. The more I describe, the less I'm actually, the less kindly I'm now feeling towards the Glashtin. Now that I'm rereading all of my notes and stuff, the less kind I'm feeling towards him actually being a genuine pest who was said to attack lonely women would primarily go for young women alone, and would, grab their hem of their skirt or their dress and not let go. So the only way of getting away would be to cut the hem of your dress or skirt. And this is, like I said, this is quite a common folklore motif that you can see it in lots of stories around the world. In order for a woman to escape some sort of folkloric creature that is after her in some way, is to cut your garment off and run. And they must just like that scrap of garment, because then they tend to be like, fair enough, goodbye. So we see this also in a story collected by Sophia Morrison, who I've spoken about before on this podcast, but who was an incredible woman and really important in Isle of Man to the preservation of the language, folklore, and so many other things. And her story, she's got the Buggane of Glen May. And this is a very similar motif in that a Buggane, so again, a big goblin-like creature, very similar to the Glashtin, and probably just the same creature, just of a different name, really, bursts into the house of a lazy woman. And one of the funny comments really was that themselves, which, because you can't name the fair folk in Isle of Man, themselves are not happy with lazy people, and they can't abide people baking after sunset. But this woman, it also said, this woman wore out more blankets than she did shoes. Which I think is just great. But a pretty lazy woman, very lazy wife apparently, was baking after sunset, left the door slightly open, and then suddenly this big old Buggane comes bursting in and grabs her, swings her over his shoulders, and goes to rush down to the water. And she's still got her apron on because she's been baking, and realises that she's still got her knife that she was using to cut up the bread, because that was another little dig, is that she was so shoddy of a baker that she needed to use a knife for things. But it saved her in this instance, because she cuts the apron and then makes her way back home to safety. And apparently the Buggane goes, "Rumble, rumble, I thought I had a lazy dirt, and I have but the edge of her skirt." So that is it's a very common thing to escape something like that, some sort of goblin creature trying to take you away, is, cut the hem of your skirt or cut the apron off and, get to safety that way. And it's also something that I quite enjoy in a way. In a way, it's framed within the context of something very unpleasant, that the kidnapping of a woman for whatever reason it's a frightening thing. But I like a story where a woman isn't actually attacked, nothing ends up happening, but two, she's able to use her wits and get out of that situation, and has a little bit more choice and a little bit more autonomy within that situation. So I do kind of enjoy that folklore motif. So it's really unclear, much like all folkloric creatures really, what the Glashtin's aims and goals really are, because, like we often say, it can be capricious. The fairies are capricious in that the Glashtin can be a helpful figure, or can be a bit of a dirty pest that you want to just get away from me, please. But as I mentioned at the start of the episode, it often gets conflated with other folkloric creatures as well. So as we heard there in that Sophia Morrison tale of the Buggane, you've got that as a creature in Manx folklore, but you also have the Caval Ushter. The Caval Ushter is another water horse, so is kind of playing again that same role as the Scottish Kelpie in trying to lure people to the water. But the Glashtin has also been described as this as well, as a water horse. So there are lots of creatures that there does seem to be quite a lot of overlap between a lot of the creatures, and they do seem to be playing like similar roles, and that is the same in all of the cultures of the world, really. These folk tales were shared orally for so long before they were ever written down, and it stands to reason that people from town to town, village to village, country to country, whatever, would have different names for very similar creatures or very similar stories functioning in very similar ways. So as I mentioned in the Scottish waterhorse episode, I think anyway, I expect I would have mentioned this, but lots of folktales surrounding the water are to scare people from playing or walking drunk or walking in the dark near deep bodies of water, because that's dangerous, because you can fall in and you can drown. So a lot of the folk tales, they're serving either a function to entertain people or to frighten people into acting or not acting in a certain way. So it makes sense that you would have lots of folklore and folkloric creatures that are actually really essentially the same creature, even though they have different names and different etymological roots for those names and what have you. It's just like what I've said before multiple times, really, in that I love folklore because I find it to be a really kind of underrated tool to understand people, a really great historical tool to understand people. And it also shows you that humans are way more similar than different across the world. And you can see the same types of folk tales pop up around the world, dependent on, landscape features, weather patterns, local religion, like whatever. There's going to be similar folk tales around the world. And I just really, really love that. So both the Cavalister and the Taroister I mentioned earlier tend to go on land and then in their sort of bovine disguise, if you will, mingle with the cows and the livestock on land, and that's how they produce their young. Not sure how it works for the Glashtin, but there we go. But a fun detail about them when they're in this sort of like bovine or equine disguise is that their hoofs are turned the wrong way. So much like a Glashtin who is disguised as a human man with the horse ears, when they are in the sort of animal form, it's even their hoofs are turned the wrong way. So there's even a physical feature when they're in animal form that gives them away that they're not quite right. And I don't know about you guys. Anyone else been playing Baldur's Gate 3? I know that it's a couple years old now, but it's still incredible. I'm on my 5th character, baby. Absolutely love it. And it just makes me think of the strange ox in Baldur's Gate 3, does it not? When you go to the tiefling camp, and there's this, and if you've got speak with animals spell, you can speak to the ox there. And you're like, something is off with this ox. Something is not quite right. And he's like, move on. Carry on. And you're like, okay. That would basically be me if I walked past a big old ox or a cow with hoofs the wrong way round. I'd be like, do you know what? I'm just going to leave you to it. You've got your secrets. I've got mine. I'm just going to leave you to it. So I think that the Glashtin, because there's so much overlap with the Cavalister, the Taroister, and the Bugain, and lots of other creatures, I just think is a really good example of showing that folklore, we have it written down now, right? We have people that have collected these stories, they've written them down, they've entrenched one spelling, and that's what we know these creatures by. But really, folklore was oral. Folklore was stories that you would share within your family, within your community. And I just think this type of folk tale is a really great example of that, really, because there's so much overlap. It's not fully defined. It's really difficult to define. And I think that's great because I don't really know if folk tales and folklore and folkloric creatures should be 100% defined. Yeah, it makes people like me, it makes our lives a bit easier when we get to share these stories. But really, at the end of the day, the magic of folklore, the magic of these stories is that they're supposed to be shared with your community, shared with family and friends. And each storyteller has a different spin on the same tale, the same story, the same creature. So I think it's fine that the Glashtin isn't 100%, defined, that there's overlap here and there with other creatures, that it's not quite 100% known what the etymology of the word means and all this sort of thing. I think it's fine for there to be a little bit of mystery and a little bit of magic in the folklore. So I think the Glashtin could probably play the role of many things. It could play the role of water horse, trying to lure you to get close so it could grab hold and then pull you down to the water and drown you, kill you, whatever. Or it could play the role as sort of a pest, bothering lonely women and trying to, again, lure them away, get them away for whatever nefarious reason. Or it could play the role of a kind of trickster, fairy, sprite type creature, in that it could just be playing pranks on people, or it could be, trying to lure people away through different means, through magic, through mischief, through trickery. Or it could sometimes be helpful. It could work on the farm. It could help you with, household chores and farm duties and things like that. So I think that the creature itself is fulfilling lots of different types of roles. The physical description, that of big old hulking hairy boy with horse ears, is fun, but also the animal version, one that is full horse or full cow, whatever, just with its hoofs the wrong way round, that's kind of fun as well. So I think it's a really fun visual folkloric creature as well, and I'd love to see people's takes on the Glashtin. It would be really cool to see. Especially because I think it's a lesser known folkloric creature as well. So I think I'm coming to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for your patience. I know this one's probably been a little bit silly and a little bit loopy, but I actually have had a lot of fun recording it. And I have recorded another episode at the beginning of the day, so that one will be coming out probably fairly soon after this one. And it just bides my time to be able to make other episodes and get those out more regularly. But my problem is, if I leave it for a few months, it just makes it worse. Whereas if I kind of keep a routine going, it's better. And every time I do an episode and I upload it and people start commenting on it, I remember how much I love finding these tales, finding these creatures, and I love sharing them with people. So I'm not just saying, be nice to me, give me nice reviews. But if you are out there and you're still listening to my podcast, and you really enjoy it, then please let me know. It does help. It does make me realise and remember that there are people out there still listening to it, really enjoying it. And it just makes me feel like I've got loads of friends out there in the world who I'm sharing these myths and legends with. And I'm not just sitting in my bedroom talking to myself and talking to Mr. Bailey. So thank you very much. To end the episode, I will just reiterate, if a nice Glashtin is out there and wants to have a go at, making me a wife and taking me to the other world, as long as he doesn't expect me to cook or clean or really do much of anything really, if he's happy with me being a lazy wife, badly baking like the woman in the Bougain story from Sophia Morrison, badly baking, having strange habits after sunset because I am a night owl, wearing out blankets more than shoes. I mean, to be fair, I love blankets, but I do also like walking, so I do also wear out lots of shoes as well. But if there's a nice Glashtin out there that wants to take me to the other world and will cook and clean and do all of that stuff for me, great, fantastic, the dream, let me know. Have a nice rest of your day, everyone. Thank you for listening. I'm in a silly mood. Sean's in a silly, goofy mood today, so hopefully you didn't hate that too much. And I promise you, my next episode is pretty good. I really enjoyed it. I did a little bit of storytelling in that one as well. You know, when I do my story and I put all the spooky atmospheric music behind it. This one I was feeling a bit more silly for this episode, but I hopefully you enjoyed it. And can't wait for you to listen to the next one. Thank you. Bye. By the way, before I finish this episode properly, I don't want you to think that I'm being silly because I don't respect Isle of Man folklore in the same way as the others. I love Manx folklore. just love you guys over there. I really want to visit Isle of Man one of these days. I'm obsessed with the Laxey wheel. I am obsessed with that wheel. I have to get over to the Isle of Man one of these days. I have to meet some of my Manx friends over there, and I have to see that giant water wheel. Like, I just know it in my bones. I've got to do it. Okay. Bye. I am your host, Sian Esther Powell, and that has been another episode of the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. If you would like to find it elsewhere on the interwebs, you can also find me on Twitter at Celtic Myths Pod, on Facebook under Celtic Myths and Legends Podcast, on Patreon at Celtic Myths Pod, as well as Instagram at Celtic_Sian, and also CelticSian.co.uk. Thank you, Muraz, Diolch, Tachpalet, Guramahagat, Trugare, Guramayed. Thank you, and speak to you next time. Thank you.